The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow over the lake, but the peaceful surface hid a storm brewing beneath. I stared at the newly carved boundary marker I'd commissioned, the cold metal gleaming like a warning. The fight was over, at least for now. Karen and her supporters had finally backed down, their plans thwarted by the evidence I'd gathered, the legal letters I'd sent, and the determination I'd refused to shed. But I knew better than to believe this was the end. I watched the lake's surface ripple softly, yet my mind was a battlefield. The quiet victory had come at a heavy cost. Months of sleepless nights, constant surveillance, and the unbearable tension of knowing they'd never stop trying to take what wasn't theirs. Their desperation had only sharpened, and I felt it, in the way the shadows stretched across the shoreline, like silent witnesses watching my every move. Suddenly, a faint flicker of movement caught my eye, an irregular shadow slipping behind the trees, just beyond the newly installed boundary. I reached for my phone, heart pounding anew, but hesitated. I'd learned to trust my instincts. This wasn't just a random visitor. Someone was testing the new boundaries, probing for a weakness. I kept my gaze fixed, waiting, listening. A soft rustling sounded like footsteps, cautious but deliberate. Cautious, but whoever it was, they knew the game now. They'd seen the legal documents, the cameras, the markers. They knew I was prepared. Still, that didn't mean they'd give up. Not without a fight. I moved quietly, slipping inside the cabin, grabbing my flashlight and peering out through a crack in the curtain. The shadow returned, closer now, moving along the shoreline, edging toward the water. My pulse quickened. I had to be ready. That's when I remembered the old underwater drone I'd kept from my days as a property lawyer, an experimental device I'd used during boundary disputes. I grabbed it from the shelf and activated it, sending a small, silent probe into the lake. It hovered just above the water, its tiny camera lens angled toward the shoreline. What I saw through the drone's feed made my stomach tighten. A figure cloaked in dark clothes was wading along the edge, just beyond the reach of my boundary markers. They paused, seemingly scanning the water, then moved closer to the shoreline, inching toward the cabin's property line. I could see the faint glow of a flashlight in their hand. This was no random trespasser. Someone was deliberately trying to push past my defenses. I felt a cold sweat break out. This was a test, a challenge. They weren't just curious. They were desperate to find a way in, to claim what I had fought so hard to protect. I clicked off the drone and swiftly grabbed my phone again, dialing the sheriff's number. No answer. I left a message, voice steady but urgent. This is private property. A person is lurking near the shoreline, possibly trespassing. Please send someone immediately, it's serious. The silence that followed was deafening. I knew they'd come back. I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. I moved quickly, grabbing my old rifle from the closet, an antique, but still reliable. I didn't want violence, but I had to be prepared. I slipped into the shadows, crouching behind the thick brush, eyes fixed on the water. Suddenly a splash sounded, closer now. Someone had entered the lake, maybe trying to sneak around or test my boundaries further. I held my breath, clutching the rifle, waiting for them to reveal themselves. Then the figure emerged from the water, dripping, moving cautiously toward the shoreline. I saw the shape clearly now, wearing dark clothing, their face obscured by a hood. They paused, looking around, then started digging in the sand with hurried, nervous motions. My mind raced. Who was this? A thief? An intruder? Or someone sent to intimidate me further? I kept the rifle steady, ready to fire if they made a move. But before I could decide, the figure suddenly stopped and looked directly at the shoreline where my cabin sat. For a moment, their eyes met mine through the drone's camera feed. A shiver ran down my spine. They knew I was watching. They wanted me to see them. They wanted me to know that no matter how many boundary markers I put in place, the threat was still there. That someone was willing to risk everything just to break through. In that instant, I realized I had only one choice. If I didn't act now, they'd come closer, or worse, find a way inside. I switched on the floodlights I'd hidden behind the cabin, flooding the shoreline in blinding white. The intruder froze, then backed into the water, vanishing into the dark. I stood there, trembling, my finger tight on the trigger. My house, my land. No one was going to take it without a fight. But I also knew this was a warning. They'd keep coming back, they'd push harder, and next time, they might succeed. I took a deep breath, eyes scanning the lake's surface. The shadows were retreating for now, but I understood the truth. This was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and I had to be ready, because whoever was out there, watching, probing, testing, was no ordinary trespasser. They were playing for keeps, and I was prepared to fight with everything I had. The figure slipped into the shadows, vanishing into the darkness of the lake as the floodlights blazed behind me. My finger hovered over the rifle's trigger, heart pounding so loudly I feared it might give me away. Every nerve was alive, every muscle tense as I stared at the ripples fading into the night. They had been so close, so bold to step onto my land, to test my defenses, and now they'd retreat. But I knew that was only a temporary victory. They'd be back. They had to be. I slowly lowered the rifle, my mind racing. Whoever it was, this intruder, knew exactly what they were doing. The way they waded into the water, the way they paused and looked directly at the cabin as if daring me to shoot. This was no accidental trespass. It was a message, a threat, a challenge, and I wasn't about to let them win. My phone buzzed, in my pocket. I grabbed it hurriedly, heart still hammering. It was the sheriff's office again, no answer, no callback. I cursed under my breath. They had to send someone. This wasn't just a petty breaking and entering. Someone was trying to push past my boundaries to force their way into my property, into my life. I could feel it in my bones. The quiet, sinister game had just begun. Moved swiftly, grabbing my flashlight and creeping back toward the cabin. Every step felt like crossing a minefield, every shadow a potential threat. I flicked on the light, sweeping the shoreline. Nothing. No movement. Just the calm, dark lake reflecting the half-moon, hiding whatever secrets lurked beneath. Suddenly I heard it, a faint cracking sound like a branch snapping under weight behind me. I spun around, shining the beam into the woods. Nothing. Just the thick trees swaying in the breeze. I told myself it was nothing, just my nerves stretched too thin after months of battle. But I knew better. Something was out there. Someone was watching. My mind flicked back to the drone footage, the figure wading into the lake, then digging in the sand, their eyes meeting mine through the camera. Whoever they were, they knew I was onto them. They'd come prepared. Maybe others too. This wasn't just a random trespasser. It was an organized attempt, an infiltration. I looked around and saw the faint glow of a light flickering across the water. Another person, perhaps, trying to circle around from the other side. Or maybe it was the same intruder testing the limits of my defenses. I had to act fast. I reached for my phone again, dialed 911, and kept my voice calm but firm, warning them of the ongoing intrusion of people lurking near my property. The line went dead. No response, just static. Frustration boiled inside me. I was alone, completely isolated in this vast darkness, with enemies lurking in the shadows. I clenched my fists, feeling the weight of years of legal battles, of fighting to protect what was mine. All those documents, the surveys, the underwater maps, they meant nothing if someone could just slip past them. Then, in a sudden rush, I saw movement again, this time closer, on the water. A boat, small, dark, gliding silently toward the shoreline. My stomach clenched. Was this another intruder? Or was someone trying to bring reinforcements? I didn't wait. I grabbed my radio, trying once more to contact authorities, but still, no answer. The line was dead. The boat reached the edge of the water, and I saw a figure step out, cloaked in black, carrying what looked like a heavy bag. They moved with purpose, heading toward a spot near the old dock. My mind spun. This was not just about trespassing anymore. It was sabotage, or theft. Someone was deliberately trying to dismantle what I'd built. My sanctuary, my family's legacy. I took a step forward, aiming my flashlight at them, but they froze, then turned sharply, disappearing into the darkness. I cursed loudly. They knew I was watching. They knew I had eyes everywhere. They wanted me to see them, to feel the fear creeping in. Well, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I sprinted back into the cabin, grabbing every weapon I could find. Knives, a baton, even the old shotgun I kept for emergencies. I moved to the window, peering out again, heart pounding. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound was a potential attack. Suddenly, the front door shuddered. Someone was trying to force their way in. I froze, holding my breath. The doorknob rattled. Then, with a sudden burst, the door swung open, crashing against the wall. A figure lurched inside, dark, cloaked, face obscured by a hoodie. I raised the shotgun instinctively. The intruder paused, hands raised in a surrendering gesture. "Easy," I said, voice trembling but firm. "Who are you? What do you want?" They didn't answer. Instead, the figure reached into their pocket, pulling out a small, wrapped object. The object glinted in the faint light. A flash drive. The intruder's eyes flicked to mine. Then they dropped the item and turned to run, fired a warning shot. The bullet ricocheted into the wall. The figure froze, then bolted out the door. I chased after them, screaming for them to stop, but they disappeared into the woods like a ghost. Back inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it tight. My mind was racing. What had they been after? A piece of paper, a device, or something more dangerous? I looked at the flash drive. Their purpose was clear. They wanted something I had, something buried in the depths of my property, something I'd fought to protect. I sat down heavily, clutching the drive. This wasn't over, not even close. They'd come prepared. They knew I knew too much. And I had a sinking feeling that the real battle was only just beginning. Whoever was out there, watching, waiting, they would keep pushing. They wouldn't stop until I was broken, until I handed over what was mine. I stared into the dark lake, realizing that the quiet of the night was just a cover. Underneath it all, a war was brewing. One I wasn't sure I could win, but I was determined not to lose. Not without a fight. Because I knew one thing for certain. The shadows hiding in, the darkness weren't retreating, they were gathering. And soon they'd make their move. The intruder's figure froze, caught in the beam of my flashlight, then suddenly lunged forward, knocking the weapon from my hands. I stumbled back, heart pounding so fiercely I thought it might burst. Hands grappled at me, rough and desperate, trying to overpower. I fought with everything I had, kicking, swinging, screaming. But they were strong, driven by something darker than I'd ever imagined. Their face was hidden behind the hoodie, but I saw the glint of something sharp, a blade glinting in the dim light. In that moment, my mind flashed to all the nights I'd spent preparing, all the legal battles, all the warnings I'd issued. I'd thought I was safe, thought I'd built enough defenses, but this was different, this was real, this was life or death. Suddenly a shot rang out, loud and echoing across the lake. The intruder's grip loosened just for a second. I seized the moment, grabbing a nearby rock and smashing it into their hand. They howled in pain, stumbling back. The blade clattered to the ground. I lunged forward, grabbing it and holding it out like a shield. "Stay back," I yelled, voice trembling but fierce. "I won't let you hurt me or my family." They backed away, eyes wild, then turned and ran into the woods. I didn't chase. I couldn't. I was shaking so badly I could barely stand, but I kept the gun pointed at the shadows where they'd disappeared. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked down at the blade, cold, deadly. My hands were trembling as I tried to steady my breathing. My mind was racing. What had just happened? Who was that, really? Why had they come? And most terrifying of all, what did they want from me? The answer hit me like a punch to the gut. The flash drive. It was gone. That was what they had been after. My evidence, my proof, my secret. The one thing I'd hidden that could destroy everything. I looked at the lake, still rippling with the aftermath of the chaos. I knew I had to act fast. They wouldn't just give up. They'd come back. Maybe with more people, more weapons, more lies. I had to protect what was mine, my land, my life, my truth. I sprinted back inside, locking every door and window. The house was eerily silent now, but I could feel the weight of their presence lingering. I grabbed my phone again, no signal. Of course, I knew I had to find help, but it was no use trying to call for backup. I was on my own, then I saw it, the flash drive, lying just outside the door where they'd dropped it during the struggle. I snatched it up, clutching it tightly. This was it, the key to everything, the reason they'd come, and the reason I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. Suddenly the lights flickered, an ominous sign. The power had been cut. I looked around desperately. I had no choice but to hide myself, hide everything. I stuffed the drive into my pocket, grabbed the oldest, most useless weapon I had, an old hunting knife, and waited. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching. Someone was coming again. I stiffened, clutching the knife, eyes wide in the dark. Whoever it was, friend or foe, I had no idea. But I knew I couldn't let them get close. The door creaked open. A figure stepped inside, silent, shadowed, yet unmistakably familiar. My breath caught. It wasn't just an intruder. It was someone I knew, someone I'd trusted once. Before I could react, they raised their hand slowly, revealing a small object, a folded piece of paper, slick and shiny. They pressed it into my hand. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. It was a photograph, grainy, blurry but unmistakably clear. A figure standing on my shoreline holding a camera, watching me. And behind them the faint outline of the same intruder, lurking in the shadows, just like I'd seen minutes before. But there was more. On the back of the photo, written in hurried, shaky handwriting, "It's not over, you can't hide forever." My heart dropped into my stomach. This wasn't just a random attack, it was a message, a warning, a threat. Someone had been watching me for months, waiting for the right moment. And now they had finally revealed themselves. I looked up, my eyes burning with fury and fear. The intruder was gone, but the threat remained, more real than ever. I knew I had to get out, had to escape, but the house was locked down tight. No way out except through the shadows. Then, the power surged back, bright, blinding. I shielded my eyes. When I looked again, the house was empty. No intruder, no sign of the fight. Just the echo of footsteps fading into the night, and the photograph, still clutched in my hand, was the only proof left of what had just happened. The final shocking truth. I stared at it, trembling. The message was clear. They'd come for the secret I guarded, the truth I'd hidden for years. They knew what I had, and they'd stop at nothing to get it. But I wasn't going down without a fight. Not this time. I slipped the photo into my pocket, turned on every light I had, and prepared myself for what was coming next. Because I knew this was only the beginning. And the final chapter of this war would be the one that would shake everything to its core. And when it ended, there would be no turning back.